9. In-flight fiasco. While awaiting takeoff from Salvador, Brazil for Sao Paulo in early 2023, a massive fight broke out among more than a dozen women on a Gol Airlines plane. It all started when a woman asked a fellow passenger if she could trade seats with her child. When the request was turned down, one of the women allegedly flew into a rage, and the situation snowballed from there. Things got so out of control that one woman's chest spilled out of her tank top, forcing her to cover up with her hands. Footage captured by onlookers showed cabin crew members desperately trying to break the fight up as the brawling passengers climbed over seats, threw punches, and pulled each other's hair. After employees finally got the situation under control, 15 people were removed from the plane, and the flight proceeded along its scheduled route. 8. Brooklyn brawl spirals out of control. After becoming entangled in a vicious rivalry in 2014, two young women named Imani Lewis and Naisha Bates decided to settle their differences in the street. Lewis brought her boyfriend and several female friends with her to the fight, which took place in Brooklyn's Clinton Hill neighborhood. Bates also brought some people with her, including her brother, Ramel Ashby. Complete mayhem broke out between the parties as the participants slapped, punched, kicked, and wrestled each other. During the free-for-all, which lasted for about 3 minutes, Ramel Ashby punched Lewis in the face. Her boyfriend, Rogelio King, came to her defense and punched Ashby back, at which point someone pulled a gun and fired 8 shots into the crowd, striking King and 2 others. Luckily, the victims survived their injuries. Authorities accused Ashby of being the gunman and charged him with 14 crimes, including multiple counts of attempted murder. The fight was captured on camera, but the jury concluded that it failed to show who the shooter was, and Ashby was ultimately acquitted of the charges. For Lewis and several others, the arguably most embarrassing consequence of the incident was the airing of their personal business in court. Throughout Ashby's trial, witnesses testified that Lewis was running an illicit prostitution and strip dancing ring at the time the fight occurred. According to prosecutors, this shady side hustle may have played a role in the feud between Lewis and Bates. Obscene text messages between the group's members were revealed in court, and at least one witness admitted to being part of the ring. She was clearly embarrassed as she left the courtroom covering her face. 7. Shailia Maruka and Alexia Tooley. During the early morning hours one day in June of 2019, police rushed to a pub in Bellevue, Florida in response to a reported shooting. The bartender told responding officers that a fight had broken out, and someone had fired a single gunshot, causing everyone to flee the establishment. Surveillance footage of the altercation showed a young woman in a black dress, identified by law enforcement as 20-year-old Alexia Elizabeth Tooley, pulling a semi-automatic handgun out of her purse and pointing it toward the ceiling before hitting another woman on the head with it. Another woman, identified as 19-year-old Shailia Chanel Maruka, also allegedly brandished a gun and pistol-whipped the same woman that Tooley had just hit. The woman who was hit in the head could be seen throwing punches at Maruka when everyone inside the bar suddenly ducked down. Police learned of the shooting after a patient showed up at a local emergency room with a gunshot wound. Authorities charged both Maruka and Tooley in connection with the incident. Both women were charged with improper exhibition of a firearm, although the charge was later dropped for Maruka. Additionally, Tooley pleaded no contest to carrying a concealed weapon. The judge overseeing Tooley's case ordered her to perform 200 hours of community service and to complete an anger management course. She was also fined around $300. And according to the Ocala Star Banner, Maruka received a similar sentence. 6. Alexis Faulkner and Sabrina Palma. While responding to a call about a fight one Saturday evening in 2019, the police in Safford, Arizona arrived at the scene to find a group of women surrounding a truck that was stopped on the wrong side of the street. One of the vehicle's windows was shattered, and a suspect who was later identified as Alexis Faulkner was standing nearby with a baseball bat in her hand. Ignoring officers' commands to put the bat down, Faulkner began shouting at a woman named Sabrina Palma. While the cops took Faulkner into custody, Palma allegedly charged toward her, shouting and hurling threats. In the meantime, a crowd of curious onlookers gathered to watch the drama unfold. The yelling and threats between Palma and Faulkner continued, even after they were both handcuffed and placed in the back of 2 separate squad cars. A witness told officers that she'd been riding around with Palma earlier that evening when the irate woman rushed out of her truck and began arguing with Faulkner. Palma had reportedly gotten involved with Faulkner's boyfriend, and instead of holding him accountable for his wandering ways, the women apparently blamed each other. In fact, the man only contributed to the chaos by allegedly luring Palma to a Walmart parking lot several nights earlier. When she got into his car, Faulkner attacked her from the back seat of her boyfriend's vehicle. Palma accused the man of pushing her out of the car during the fight, and Faulkner was cited for assault. When the police arrived to break up the altercation in the street later that week, Faulkner claimed that her romantic rival had started it by throwing rocks at her house. She admitted to smashing the window of Palma's truck and was charged with disorderly conduct and criminal damage. Palma was charged with disorderly conduct, which she was perfectly fine with, according to police, who said that she told them she wanted revenge against Faulkner, even if it meant going to jail. It seems like everything is captured on camera these days. 5. Jamie Messerly. Early one Monday morning in 2019, 911 dispatchers in Billings, Montana, received a call from a woman who claimed that her daughter had threatened to hurt her twin sister. Officers arrived at the residence to find Jamie Messerly with blood on her head. Messerly's sister, whose name was withheld from court documents, was bleeding profusely from a wound to her arm. The victim told the police that she and Messerly had been drinking with a friend when the argument broke out between them. She claimed that Messerly was really drunk when things turned violent. Messerly allegedly stood outside her bedroom door, threatening to kill the victim, who opened the door to find her twin standing there with a knife in her hand. After dodging an attempted cut to the neck, the victim said that she tried to wrestle the blade out of Messerly's hand, which was when she was stabbed in the arm. The friend, who was over when all hell broke loose, reportedly told the cops that the disagreement between the women initially seemed like a typical sisterly fight, but it quickly escalated into shouting and then became violent. He said he tried to calm Messerly down, but the situation continued to become more heated, even after the twins went to separate rooms. Messerly was arrested on suspicion of assault with a weapon, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 4. Kiani Phoenix. 26-year-old Kiani Phoenix had an unsettled argument with her ex's sister when the two crossed paths at a bodega in Far Rockaway, Queens, one morning in 2022. Surveillance footage would later show that the encounter started out as a shouting match and quickly devolved into a fist fight, with the women throwing punches and trying to rip each other's wigs off. They eventually took the brawl outside, where several bystanders tried unsuccessfully to separate them. One of the women, later identified by law enforcement as Phoenix, got into her car as the other continued to throw fists. She backed the vehicle up, repositioned it, and then stepped on the gas in an apparent attempt to mow down her opponent. Instead, the car rolled up onto the sidewalk and hit 59-year-old Milton Storch, who was seated on his walker outside the bodega as he enjoyed the morning sunrise. The vehicle knocked Storch off his walker and pinned him against the building before Phoenix calmly drove away from the scene. Unfortunately, Storch died from his injuries. Another victim who was injured during the incident was rushed to a nearby hospital and survived. Phoenix faces a slew of charges in connection with the hit and run, including murder, attempted murder, assault, and leaving the scene of an accident without reporting. The case is ongoing, but if she's convicted, she could face up to 25 years to life behind bars. 3. Natasha Noland. After attending a Brad Paisley concert in Santa Cruz, California in 2012, a group of more than a dozen highly intoxicated friends made the wise decision not to drive. Instead, they planned ahead and hired a party bus to take them home. Things somehow still went terribly wrong, however, despite this conscious effort to be responsible. During the drive home, 25-year-old Natasha Noland got into a catfight with another young woman named Colleen Martinez. One of the vehicle's doors opened, causing both women to spill out of the bus as it traveled along a highway at 45 miles per hour, 72.4 kilometers per hour. After landing on the hard pavement, Noland was dragged beneath the bus, and unfortunately, she died from her injuries. According to police, several members of the party left the scene, and witnesses initially seemed reluctant to cooperate. An investigation found that the door the women fell out of was broken, and that the owner of the party bus company had known about the problem for months. The door had popped out of place several times prior, and it only required a simple fix, yet nobody had bothered to repair it. Sadly, Noland's death and the injuries suffered by the other women who fell out of the bus were completely preventable. John Reno St. James, the owner of the party bus, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 4 years in prison for failing to fix the faulty door. 2. Jasmine Nelson. 32-year-old Jasmine Nelson and a 26-year-old woman were entangled in an ongoing dispute when the tensions between them erupted into blows at a park in West Palm Beach, Florida one evening in 2022. A crowd gathered around to watch, and the fight was live-streamed on social media. What started as a fistfight quickly turned deadly when Nelson allegedly pulled out a gun and shot her opponent. Afterward, she fled the scene. Police arrived a short while later to find the victim lying dead in the parking lot. Footage of the fatal encounter shows the women punching each other beside a car when the unmistakable pop of a gunshot rings out. Right at that moment, the victim could be seen collapsing onto the pavement. It was then that the panicked bystanders fled in all directions, including those who had their cameras rolling just moments earlier. Nelson was taken into custody at a nearby restaurant later that day. She remains behind bars without bond on a pending second-degree murder charge. 1. Stacy DeGrandchamp and Holly Boisvert. On a Saturday night in 2002, police in Fort Wayne, Indiana were called back to the scene of a house party they'd been at earlier that evening to address a noise complaint. This time, they found a young woman lying in the driveway with life-threatening injuries. Stacy DeGrandchamp had been stabbed in the chest by her former friend, Holly Boisvert. She was rushed to a nearby hospital where, sadly, she died from her injuries. The occasional drama was nothing new for Stacy and Holly, who both had strong personalities and tended to butt heads. But the tensions between the pair reached a boiling point after Stacy began dating Holly's ex-boyfriend, Brandon Muff. By the time the night of the stabbing rolled around, the sparks between Stacy and Brandon had fizzled. But Stacy saw no harm in attending the house party, which was taking place at Brandon's residence. She and Holly were reportedly outraged when they realized that the other was at the party, and a shouting match quickly escalated into blows. When the fight ended, people noticed that Stacy appeared weak. She fell to the ground and began convulsing. Nobody realized that she'd been stabbed until bystanders rushed to her aid and noticed that her shirt was soaked in blood. Holly admitted to police that she and Stacy had fought, but she denied stabbing her former bestie. She suggested that perhaps Stacy had impaled her chest on a sharp object when she fell to the ground, and that her injuries were accidental. An autopsy revealed that the young woman had been stabbed, but police couldn't find the weapon, and some witnesses who had crucial information were less than forthcoming. No arrests were made, and the case soon went cold. A reluctant eyewitness finally came forward to law enforcement in 2019 and provided details that helped fill in the gaps that had prevented any arrests from being made in the past. Holly was surprised when detectives showed up on the doorstep of her home in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin to discuss the case. While they were there, they discovered that she still had the knife that she'd stabbed Stacy with. 18 years after the tragic encounter, Holly was taken into custody on a second-degree murder charge. She pleaded guilty to a reduced count of voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Between time off for good behavior and other factors that may help to shorten her time behind bars, she could see freedom as early as 2030. But Holly's loved ones were happy to finally see some measure of justice served. Do you think Holly Boisvert deserves a heavier prison sentence? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.